Guys, recording.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Startup Operator Weekly Roundup. The Weekly Roundup is a show for folks like you who like to stay updated with the latest developments from the Indian startup ecosystem. If this is the first time you're tuning into our channel, then do consider subscribing to this show for more regular updates. This episode has been brought to you by Park Avenue. More about them later in the episode. Now, this has been a very interesting week. As you're wrapping up the year, India becomes the first country in the world to get a gold ATM machine, right? Imagine withdrawing gold from ATM machine. That's pretty cool. Along with that, a lot of companies are now taking initiatives to bring in more liquidity into the ecosystem. We do have VC firms raising funds and also other tech companies that are opening up their own funds to help early stage startups. Along with that, Amazon is betting big on India's space sector, running multiple tests on how to process data within the satellites that are orbiting into the Earth without sending it back on ground. Then, of course, I think the biggest trend on Twitter was Ashneer Grover controversies are back. So we'll be talking more about that in
Doglapan.
about Doglapan in this week's roundup. So stay tuned. Also, then RBI is conducting a lot of innovations on how to strengthen the UPI platform, and most recently, it's going to allow for multiple debits. What is multiple debits? How will this work? We'll be talking more about that in this episode. So stay tuned. Roshan, this Bangalore weather is very difficult to bear, but how are you getting along?
It's freaking amazing, man. This is the perfect weather to kind of curl up in your bed with maybe like a hot chocolate and catch some old favorite movie of yours. I'm planning to do that right after this. So you guys are keeping me away from this. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I mean, obviously, it's amazing to talk to you guys about startups and everything that's happening every week. Well, last week was interesting. The Twitter files continues, and the second version of the Twitter files was even more damning than the first, right? And in fact, I mean, this morning we had the third version as well, right? And Lord Elon is really, like a bull in a china shop at this point of time, right? I mean, he's really serious about purging Twitter in that sense. But I think it's crazy, right? When you read these threads, you realize how they've moved away from this whole rule-based system to something that's entirely arbitrary and discretionary, right? I mean, people are exchanging email threads about who we should ban, what sort of content we should promote, or shadow ban, and so on and so forth. And they've kind of confirmed everything we all thought was kind of true, right? I mean, all the allegations about shadow banning, restricting reach, and so on. Elon himself has said that we guarantee freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach, right? But that's a more transparent approach, right? I mean, he's saying that if you are shadow banned, you will know for sure, right? And you can appeal as well. So, which is definitely more than what Twitter has been doing over the years. But do catch those Twitter files threads. I mean, it's pretty damning and it's pretty mind blowing actually.
पढ़ते रहिए,
Wait.
सतर्क रहिए.
And then last week, ISRO cannot stay out of the news. I mean, they've tested hypersonic missiles, and these kind of capabilities being developed indigenously is fantastic. It's feather in the hat for sure, right? And we should definitely decrease reliance on other countries with that. I mean, although I think this was in collaboration with Russia, right? I don't know if the US would like that too much, but fantastic stuff. I mean, the Indian space sector has been exploding, no pun intended, right? So this year has been great on those fronts, and we'll bring you. We plan to bring you some of these space startups as well, right? Pixel, Agnikul, Skyroot. I've reached out to a few of these folks. Hopefully, we'll have them on the podcast. If you are watching and if you know someone in those companies, I'd love to talk to you. Please connect us, and yeah, I mean, we'll send you something along the way. What else?
The FIFA is going on.
Yeah.
Are you watching the matches?
Not a single match. Not a single match. I've watched only the highlights. I mean, it's just at odd hours when I have Zoom calls or, when I'm out with friends or whatever. Right. But hopefully, I mean, I'll catch one or two of those matches.
Right now, all the matches are important. I mean, so yesterday, both the quarterfinal matches went to extra time and then to penalties. Both had last minute equalizers. It's pretty nail biting. So, yeah, right now, all these matches are going to be really interesting. And let's see who comes out on top.
Yeah, and in more serious stuff, Apple is planning to move its manufacturing out of China. They've made statements to that effect, right? But yeah, something like 45% of the manufacturing of all equipment could be out of China, right? And rather, I mean, it could be in India by 2030 or so. So yeah, India, Vietnam, and the rest of these countries stand to benefit from this. And Apple kind of moving its manufacturing facilities here will definitely up our capabilities in that sector as well. Also, last week I caught a really fun episode of the Naan Curry podcast with Ishwar Vikas. Some of you may remember he is the founder of Mukunda Foods that was later invested in by Zomato as well. So think about food automation, robotics, all of that stuff. We've hosted him on the podcast earlier, maybe about a year and a half back, maybe even older than that.
Yeah, it's before that
Yeah,
as well.
fantastic entrepreneur, and they've come a long way. Do catch that episode as well. We'll link to that in the description. I mean, we're barely through the intro and we've already given more work to our producer.
All right, so but let's get started with the news, right? Now, you remember those huge queues that were outside ATM lines back in
16,
2016
yeah.
when the demonetization hit, and right now people just might have another reason to line up in front of ATMs
Hmm.
because India gets the world's first gold dispensing ATM machine, right? So this company Gold Sikka, which is a company that deals in the lending and selling of buying and selling of gold, introduced the first vending machine in Hyderabad, and of course they have plans to expand it around South India first. These gold machines will be dispensing 24 karat gold coins, which will range from the denomination of zero point 0.5 milligrams and will go up to 100 grams, right? And given that India is the largest consumer of gold in the world, and that too more in rural areas than in urban areas,
Hmm.
how do you think this will help the people?
Yeah, this is awesome. Like I've said before, I think this whole financialization of gold and some of these hard assets, right, like real estate and so on, is absolutely necessary. People should be able to trade, transact in these assets for sure, right? And yeah, I've seen the video with this gold ATM. It's pretty interesting. It's very neat. I mean, it takes a little while, but then you get this card with the gold coin as such. I'm not I'm not sure how many people will actually go out and do that. But think about it, right? I mean, you don't have to go to a jeweler or
You don't have to go
anything
to
like
a
that.
jeweler, you'll be saving a lot of like
Yeah,
the money given to middlemen, and this is directly
yeah.
will be the rates will be set by the London Bullion Exchange or something,
Mm,
right? So the rates will be real time. You'll be getting 24 karat gold. It's
yeah,
pretty sweet,
yeah. Amazing. Anything that can help people trade and transact in these assets is a net positive to me.
right?
So, are you going to withdraw any gold from the ATM?
Well, let it come to Bangalore first.
Not in this weather, at least.
Not in this one, of course. All right, so moving on. So now we have seen how funding have declined month on month, week on week, at least recently, right? But that does not mean that we are going for a funding crunch because there are a lot of investors that are raising money out there,
Mm,
and that money will need to be deployed somewhere. So most recently, India's Blume Ventures they've announced the close of its fourth fund, which will have a size of $200 million, and with that, I think the total assets under management for Blume Ventures will come close to $600 million. Now, with the fourth fund, they'll be investing in early stage and seed stage startups, and check sizes will vary from $500,000 and go up to 2.5 million. Of course, we will see some exceptions here and there. They will look to back 30 to 35 startups from this fund, and last year they have made at least a dozen investments, I think. Right, many of them including the likes of Slice, Grey Orange, Turtle Mint, Servify, Exotel, Intercity, some great names over there.
mm,
But yeah, we have seen, right? I think it was Inc 42 that published a chart where we have seen the early stage investments still like remain at par with each other,
mm,
but the growth stage investments have really slowed down,
yeah.
right? And when you look at the economics of these investments, right? Early stage investment investors will try to put in money, which are more likely to get growth stage funding. Whereas people who are investing in growth stage startups, they will look how quickly can these companies turn into be profitable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So how will this change in the coming years?
So that's a good point that you bring up, right? I mean, I think this year we have not had so many growth stage investments as compared to, like, let's say last year, right? And check sizes have been relatively smaller. As I've often said, 2021 was a glorious exception. It was a bull run of bull runs. There was crazy optimism. And when you're coming off of such a year, right, everything will kind of pale in comparison. But having said that, I called this at least 3 months back that, look, two things. One, VCs will continue to raise new funds, and second, early stage funding activity will continue unabated, right? And when I look at CNBC, etc., I mean, they're saying the same thing right now. And this is going to happen, right? For the second or third largest startup ecosystem in the world, India still attracts very low capital compared to the world or the global VC funding as such, right? And we have a ton of startups here, and early stage is definitely interesting, right? Because a lot of these folks are working on very interesting ideas, and given that India's domestic market itself is so huge, 600 million internet users, soon to be 900 million
Yeah.
internet users in another 3 years. So this is amazing, right? And if you look at everything that's happened on the geopolitical realm, everyone is trying to move away from China, and so India has to get this money. The money has to flow somewhere, and we're going to get this cash, right? So yeah, I mean, you're going to see a lot more dry powder come India's way, and a lot more early stage funding activity as well. I was saying this to someone that you know people are just holding onto their chips right now,
Yeah.
but give it maybe 6 months or a year, and you will see all of this return in full bloom for sure.
Right.
No pun intended again.
Okay, we're talking about Bloom. Bloom had recently published an anthology of India's top podcast episodes, which has like lessons for the Indian startup ecosystem. Podcast conversations across from Indian podcasters, right? And the book was called Narrowcast, and it also featured your conversation with Deepak Abbott of India Gold.
Yeah.
So do check it out. It's available on Amazon, and if you get a copy with it, why don't you send us a picture and we'll send something your way.
Yeah,
Look at
Gunjan
us.
will send something your
Look
way
at us
for
just
sure.
trying to bribe for everything.
Yeah, ratings, reviews, pictures, reach, engagement, everything. But anyway, I mean, speaking about Bloom, right? I think Bloom is one of those homegrown Indian funds that has done really, really well. You have to remember 15 years back, this whole VC startup madness wasn't as obvious. And really, props to the likes of Axel, Bloom for pioneering this in the early days. So I think the entire ecosystem owes them a debt of gratitude. Bloom also was one of the early SaaS folks, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the folks who really bet on SaaS as such. I mean, their early portfolio included Exotel, for example.
Correct. Yes.
And yeah, they've come a long, long way. So hats off to Karthik Reddy and the rest of the team as well.
Yeah, I think in an interview, Karthik also mentioned that they'll be continuing to focus on SaaS, and maybe with this fourth fund, they might expand into D2C companies as well. But at least for the near future, I don't think crypto or Web3 is going to be too much of a focus for these guys. Okay, but it's not only these venture capital firms, right, that are helping startups raise money, but we have also seen alternate forms of financing in terms of debt investments and stuff like we discussed earlier. And last week, LegalPay, which is the country's largest legal and insolvency financer, also announced a $2 million corpus to help fund early stage companies that are working in legal tech and startups that can help make legal services much more accessible in the country. And of course, when the COVID hit, we did see a lot of court proceedings move online and stuff like that. But if you just look at the whole legal processes that happen, much of these processes are very reputable and very like administrative in nature. I think there's a lot of scope for innovation here, and it's great to see that some of the well-known players from the industry actually take an initiative to fund these companies.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of ops-heavy administrative work in the courts. We know, right? I mean, there are lakhs of cases pending right now with the courts. 40 or 50% of them are land-related, believe me, right? And I think with some of this drone stuff that's happening and so on, right? I mean, there could be a huge shift there as well. And I've said earlier that blockchain is this is a fantastic use case for blockchain, right? Yeah, legal tech, there's plenty, man. There's amazing stuff. And on a lighter note, some of my favorite videos right now on Instagram are judges losing their shit about lawyers. I mean, hilarious stuff. You watch some of these videos and you realize the British never left India. They kind of deputed milords to sort of honorable milords, if I might add, to take over, their reigns.
But segueing into a different topic, AWS has announced last week that it successfully ran a suite of AWS compute and machine learning software on an orbiting satellite in a first of its kind space experiment. This experiment was conducted over the past 10 months in low Earth orbit satellites, which were designed to test a faster and a more efficient method for customers to collect and analyze data. So what AWS is trying to do is to provide computing power to satellites so that all the raw details and data they capture is processed in the satellite itself, and then it is beamed down back to Earth. Now with this, what happens, the cost of processing power greatly reduces, and plus more data can be obtained by folks on ground. And I think this can actually be revolutionary, considering that satellite needs to take in, like, if not terabytes, gigabytes of data, and those images are then processed on Earth and then distributed for research.
I think if you look at the developing use cases for space, right? I mean, spectroscopy, agriculture, weather, farming, and so on and so forth. I mean, if you look at these, I mean, these are all basically data processing, right? I mean, you're taking in data from the satellites, you're processing it, and then putting it onto applications so people understand weather patterns, or they figure what the crop is like, what the harvest is going to be, etc., right? And so the amount of data processing involved in this is staggering, right? Anything to improve compute on this is great.
Yeah, this is gonna help reduce the size of images by up to 42% for increased processing speeds, and it will also enable real-time inferences on orbit satellites.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I hope our OneDrive costs also come down given the file sizes of all of these roundups and episodes and what.
Okay, but what's not free are Paytm stocks, right?
Wow, what a segue.
So,
Gunjan Saha is in full form today, yeah?
So 197 Communication, which is the parent company for Paytm, recently announced that it will be buying back shares from investors, right? Giving them an option to exit. But they've been coming under a lot of pressure, especially since the lock-in period for Sequoia and all the anchor investors, the lock-in periods have gotten over. And this, of course, spread a lot of panic among retail and other institutional investors. Now, and also this share buybacks happen when a company wants to retain control over what the share prices are. And we have seen Paytm share price have dropped over 75% since they went IPO, right? This was from a cost price of 2,150 to now 540 rupees. It's a massive, massive drop.
Crazy.
And while
I'm so glad that I applied and didn't
you
get
didn't get the
the
allotment.
allotment for Paytm.
No, but this share buybacks is also Paytm is not the only company doing share buybacks this year, right?
Nykaa has done it as well, right?
Nykaa has done it, Infosys has done it, TCS have done it, even Reliance have done it.
Yeah.
But these buybacks happen from the cash that these companies generate from profit, right? But we know Paytm is not a profitable company yet. So this buyback is gonna happen from the money that they have raised from in the fundraisers. So what does that mean?
See, I think it's a desperate attempt to sort of stabilize the share price, right? I mean, they're already down from a 20 billion valuation to around 3.5 billion right now. And given that the lock-in period has ended, obviously there is some panic that investors will kind of dump their shares, right? And retail investors will be left holding the bag of shit. But yeah, I mean, this is an attempt to sort of instill confidence in investors. I don't know to what degree it will help. But yeah, I mean, this is something that they have to do, right, to show that hey, we're serious about this business, right, and which is why we're buying back these shares to show that we want more ownership and we will drive this ahead going forward. I still feel that Paytm will probably get snapped up by the likes of Tata, Reliance, Adani, one of these folks, right, for maybe $1 billion and
Yeah, I think
change.
there will be some consolidation coming in the
Yeah.
UPI
No,
market.
they're a national brand. They have about 300 million plus users, if I'm not mistaken. Right? They have some technology infrastructure for sure. So all of this is worth something. I'm not really sure, if it's worth 3 billion or
Yeah.
even a billion. I don't know if how these large numbers work. But at some point, they're going to be lucrative for an Adani or a Reliance or a Tata to say that, hey, I mean, how much will it take for us to sort of build this out, right? I mean, build and not just the technology and everything, but also have the users, the brand, all of that stuff, right? Because see, Paytm has been in existence for what, 15, 20 years
Yeah,
now?
it's probably one of the first fintech
Yeah,
companies in the country.
197 has been around for probably around 2 decades. But Paytm as a national brand itself has been around for what, at least 7, 8 years, right? I mean,
More than that, in fact.
and they benefited a great deal from demonetization and so on. So there is something of value, and I think it could be enough value for one of these larger folks, conglomerates, to sort of acquire and integrate their offerings as well on the digital realm.
Yeah.
This episode of the Startup Operator podcast is brought to you by Park Avenue. Now that we're all back at the office meeting colleagues and clients, it's time to ditch those PJs and look sharp with Park Avenue's range of 100% cotton, wrinkle-free shirts. They're super easy to maintain and keep you looking fresh through the day. So my fellow startup operators, visit the Park Avenue store or myraymond.com and check out the new wrinkle-free shirt collection.
So RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das announced that an additional functionality for UPI platforms will be enabled through which multiple debits would be allowed. The UPI currently includes functionality to undertake recurring payments, but this is through a single block payment method. It is now being enhanced to allow customers to block funds in their accounts for multiple payments for a specific nature. Right now, so now with this, what happens? Your e-commerce payments are going to become more easier. Your bill payments, like electricity, your utilities, become much more easier. But there are a lot of big words, single block payments, multiple debits.
Mm.
What does those terms mean?
See, multiple debits are basically recurring stuff, right? I mean, so let's say you pay 500 or 600 for Netflix on a monthly basis. I mean, you get to block that out of your account going forward. See, overall, the direction in which UPI is sort of trending, right, is towards financial management, right? Very low touch financial management at that. I mean, I don't know how many of you will remember about 10 years back, there was a preponderance of these wealth management apps, right? Without the whole wealth management or asset, you couldn't buy assets on it, but I remember Walnut, which was really good actually. In fact, they got acquired,
Walnut
I
is a
think.
decade old.
Yeah, Walnut app. There might be a different Walnut you're referencing, but
No,
there was a Walnut app as
so it
well.
basically organizes your SMSs and says.
Ah, exactly, the same one, right? So a bunch of folks trying to sort of read through SMSs, as he said, integrate with your banking system to figure out, okay, what is savings, what is expenses, and so on, right? Helping you. I think UPI could very well transform to a low-touch financial management application of its own, right? Multiple different applications at that, wherever you have your UPI, right? So we saw this with UPI 2.0 as well,
Right.
and with loans and everything coming in, I think this is a fantastic initiative. I think the way in which RBI and in particular on the UPI aspect, right? I mean, way they've been progressing. I'm serious. I mean, I think any fintech product team should be like absolutely amazed by the quality of the roadmap, the way they're sort of progressing on this front, right? Amazing, amazing stuff. I think perhaps UPI is the best fintech innovation over the last 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And see, these things are great, right? But all these players that are implementing UPI, like Paytm, they ran into trouble with their IPO. And last weekend, BharatPe kind of made the news not for the right reasons. They have sought up to 88 crore rupees in damages from its former managing director and founder Ashneer Grover and family. The company alleges that the Grover family has created fake bills and listed fictitious vendors to provide services to the company and overcharge the company for recruitment just so that they can go on their own vacations. I think they even bought a duplex in South Delhi and stuff like that, right? Now, of course, these are all allegations, nothing has been proved yet. Ashneer Grover and family and even BharatPe have been in controversy since the beginning of this year, right? And this all started when Ashneer Grover was accused of using inappropriate language and threatening a Kotak Group employee for failing to secure an allotment and funding for the Nika IPO for himself and his wife. What started there has now continued for over a year, and so just tarnishing. I don't know whether BharatPe business is getting impacted about it or not, but it really does not put a nice color into the whole fintech ecosystem.
No, I had half a mind to not discuss this at all. I think because this is just tamasha, right? And there was similar stuff happening around housing and what's the founder's name?
With,
That was exactly my point, right? Rahul Sharma, about 10 years back or something, right? I mean, this whole fracas that he had with the Sequoia investors and whatnot. I mean, who even remembers that shit right now? I mean, none of this stuff is either related to innovation or policy or any
it's
of that
just
stuff.
drama.
It's just drama. It's just basic nonsensical garbage that is being thrown around, and the media folks are lapping it up, right? I mean, I even the saner ones like Money Control had like stories on this, and they're going tom-tomming this guy's opinion, their counter opinion, and whatnot. I feel like it's just a massive, massive distraction. See, there's no doubt in my mind that if the allegations are true, then this is downright fraud, right? Some folks have argued that, hey, in larger startups, this kind of happens. The founders do have to take money out of the company. How do they get rich, and so on and so forth? I'm sorry, but this is fraud, right? Whether you take 5 crores or 80 crores, I mean, it's definitely fraud. I mean, creating recruitment
Yeah.
companies and consultants and all of that. I mean, I can understand maybe billing a party on the company, right? I mean, if you
Yeah.
invited a few BharatPe folks, I mean, well and good. You
Take
might
them
have
out
to
for an
do
expensive dinner or something. You enjoy, you
whatever,
bill.
right? I mean, I can understand that. I mean, that's a little bit of a gray, but that's fine. But all of the other stuff is just massive. If the allegations are proven, there's no two ways about it, right? I mean, this is fraud. And yes, Ashneer is a very, very entertaining guy. I really loved all of his segments on Shark Tank and whatnot. I think obviously he's very perceptive, very intelligent, and so on. But is he an idol to sort of emulate? I don't think so, right? I think founders should look up to the likes of maybe Sridhar Vembu, even Sachin Bansal to an extent, right? I mean, now with Navi and everything, those are the folks to look up to, really, right? Or even Girish Mathrubootham of Freshworks. I mean, these folks have done fantastic stuff. There is no paucity of that as such, right? I mean, we're in an ecosystem right now that is thriving, that has plenty of these idols that we can emulate. and in that, offering so much of airtime to this is just crazy, right? And think about it, right? I mean, India is so cash starved, and in a cash starved environment, as a lender, if you're not making money, then there's something fishy, really. I mean, there's something in there for sure, right? So this requires a greater deal of corporate governance, I think, compliance, governance, regulation, all of that stuff, and just, VCs perhaps being a little more stringent on this stuff. I mean, I was listening to this Michael Saylor podcast with Patrick Bet-David, and oh my god, I mean, the stuff that is keeps coming out about FTX is just blows my mind. The way this guy played leverage and margin, and everyone knew it, right? I mean, it's not like people were blind to it, but they somehow went along for the ride, right? And it's kind of irresponsible. I mean, we'll speak about this a little more in the Park Avenue PowerPoint segment, but all of this is, yeah, I mean, it's just a distraction, I would say.
No, but you bring up a really important point regarding the whole Indian media, right? I mean, I understand the stories like this sell more, but it also frames an opinion for the outside world on as to like how the
Yeah,
ecosystem is, right?
exactly.
And these things
Yeah,
stick,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I mean, it's a duty to report, but that does not mean your wall-to-wall coverage is just
See,
about
the
that.
media business itself is broken. I mean, this whole clickbaity stuff. See, there's a reason why, Elon has gone to Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss and the others, right? I mean, these are quote unquote Substack journalists, right? The folks who broke away from the mainstream.
But speaking about Twitter controversies, right? Lord Elon is, I mean, now that he has power, I mean, he's kind of keeping things entertaining for us.
Yeah.
Last month, Twitter had launched the whole $8 per month subscription for you to get a blue badge, right? Which is to signify that you're a recognized and a verified profile. You're a public figure.
No, you're a verified guy.
You're a verified person. That was soon before the new Twitter Blue subscriptions were suspended after users immediately abused the false verification and posed as public figures and corporations. During this time, Elon also claimed that hey, Apple has stopped advertising on Twitter. And to retaliate back to that, Elon said that no, Apple charges 30% hidden taxes for itself. And of course, I'm sure this is very similar to Google's practice as well. Now, Elon has gone out to public and say that Twitter will cost $7 per month if you sign up via the web. And if you're signing up for an iPhone, you'll be charged $11. Now I think that's just a low jab for a person who can own an iPhone. For them, paying $2 or $3 additional shouldn't be much.
Hey, why not? I mean, he's just factoring the cost of arbitrage, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's right. He's factoring this 30% cost, but
yeah.
wow, I mean, such disparities.
Man, I mean, and to think that Elon and Tim Cook, met, right, famously
Yeah.
at that whole Cupertino campus and whatnot.
How would that meeting would have gone?
Yeah, I mean, imagine being a bug on the wall or on the sidewalk of that conversation, right? Yeah, unche log unche pasand. Yeah, crazy. So I think Elon is just iterating real time, at that scale, at 300 million, 400 million user scale, and he's bound to make a few mistakes. But one thing about Elon is he's quick to recognize some of this stuff, right, and roll back things if required. I think he knows that this whole Twitter blue tick for $8, may have been a little premature. I think he recognizes that. Perhaps they might come out with other options, right? And right now the concern is that anyone could become Tim Cook or Steve Jobs or whatever and get a blue tick. But how would we know if that person is who they are claiming to be, right? And so I think they will sort that out maybe through different types of badges or whatnot, right? I mean, maybe like an orange tick for government officials or whatever else, right? I think they'll work the chinks out, but just given the amount of stuff that's happened over the last month or 2 months, I'm very confident that we'll figure a way. Yeah.
Let it sink in. It will happen. So let's wrap up the other major headlines from the previous week. HealthCart has raised $135 million in a funding round, which is led by Singaporean wealth fund Temasek. It will use the fund from the Series H round to promote its brands, increase offline distribution, expand international operations, and make acquisitions. YOLO, which is an Indian edtech platform that works with private K-12 schools to offer online learning programs to middle and low-income families, has raised $22.5 million in funding round, which is led by UAE headquartered Winter Capital. Now, one thing that really stands out for me is that Healthcart has raised a Series H round, right? Under what circumstances does a startup need to raise funds as far as Series H?
Well, I guess they're ratcheting up the size of the dream, right? I mean, they're probably showing a massive outcome for the end investors as such. Yeah, I mean, I would love to have a look at some of these presentation decks and see the kind of numbers involved. I'm sure that, they're pretty mind-boggling at that. But yeah, I mean, Healthcart is more e-commerce than healthcare, I should say. Right? It's just a massive, massive business. And, we spoke about, maybe not having large check sizes, but I mean, we are seeing a few large check sizes, right? 135 million is pretty significant. I think last time, a few of them had raised 50 or 60 million dollars
Right.
as well. So yeah, the money will come into the system. I guess the number of startups that will kind of get that money is very, very limited and scarce at this point of time. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, folks, I mean, if you have any thoughts, do let us know in the comment section below, or you can also send us an email at the startupoperator@gmail.com.
For every comment, Gunjan will record a special thank you note for you.
Okay, so now to a Park Avenue PowerPoint section. Recently, there was this article by Anand Lunia on Economic Times where he talks about why journeys should be the destination for founders and investors, right? He says that we as a startup nation seem to have chosen fundraise as destination, secondary sales as the prize, and high spends as the path. What do you make of that?
I think it's a very bold article. Not a lot of investors will come out and say this, but I think it had to be said, right? I think we definitely deserve a correction. And let's face it, I mean, there are two kinds of businesses right now. A startup that is run as a business, which has to earn revenue and profits, more importantly, and another which is, built on valuations, right? I mean, you saw the Series
Yeah.
H, for example, and which makes money for founders and perhaps some investors and some employees, right? And you saw this in 2021 with the ridiculous kind of valuations that people raised at. One company I know raising at 65x forward multiple, right? I mean, how the hell will they ever make enough money to sort of justify that? I have no idea,
And
right?
these
But
valuations are also just like on paper, right? Not that it has.
no, see, that's the thing, right? I mean, it does not necessarily have to be that, right? I mean, now imagine doing secondaries in that company, right? I mean, you would rather it be 65x or maybe 150x rather than 20x, right? I mean, if you're doing secondaries, because your money is worth a lot more then. I mean, so I would love secondaries at 65x multiple rather than, an 18 or 20x sort of a sober multiple, right? I mean, it's very stark and apparent the kind of differences in the Indian startup ecosystem right now, and Anand has done a great job of talking about it, right? I mean, so kudos to him for sure.
We'll link the article in the description below.
Yeah.
So, Roshan, tell us about your conversations you'll be having this week with Anurakt of Club and Subbu of Wisdom.
Well, I've mentioned these folks on the previous episodes as well. Forgive us for not putting this out earlier. There have been some schedule changes and whatnot, as you can imagine, with December coming up. Anurakt, very interesting conversation, revenue-based financing. And also, I mean, one thing that was apparent in that conversation is Anurakt is such a deep thinker, right? I mean, if you look at some of his book suggestions and whatnot, very, very eclectic collection of reading for sure. We spoke about revenue-based financing and how that's important in a market like India, and some of the executional aspects as well. Well, Subbu of Wisdom, it got postponed to today. In fact, I mean, I'm going to be speaking to him today. And Subbu is an old hand, right? He was formerly MD of Blume Ventures. And I'm going to talk to him about wealth tech and what it's like to operate an exchange, right? And also sell assets. So, yeah, these could be very interesting conversations. Do check them out and please share it with all of your startup operator friends.
Yep. And along with that, please encourage your friends to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform, as this will help more people discover our content. For more regular updates, do follow us on our social media platforms as well. You will see the links somewhere in the screen. And if you want this straight in your WhatsApp inbox, you'll find our WhatsApp subscription link in the description below. So that's it for this week. We'll be back with more year-end updates as we inch closer to the end of the month. But until then, have a great Christmas break. Enjoy the time. Send gifts to people and to us.
Yeah.
And we'll be back with more updates.
Yeah. Grab your hot chocolate or whiskey, whatever is your kick, and we'll see you
Rum
soon.
cakes. All right, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.